Somewhere near you, on a piece of land nobody wanted, there is a long, low building with no windows. Rows of identical roll-up metal doors, each one marked with nothing but a number. No staff you can see. No reason to look twice. It is the single most boring structure in American commerce. And it is also one of the most profitable square footage on the continent. You think a self-storage facility sells you space, a concrete box by the month for your kayak and your dead relatives' furniture. It doesn't really. What it actually sells you is a number, a low, friendly, get-you-in-the-door number, and then, very quietly, it raises it. And because of one small fact about human beings, you almost never leave. Over the last few years, that simple trick was industrialized, rolled up by Wall Street into one of the great real estate fortunes in America. And then, just as the whole country could see how good it was, it cracked. Start with why the building itself is such a good asset, before anyone gets clever. A self-storage facility is, structurally, the cheapest serious real estate you can build. No plumbing to speak of, no kitchens, no insulation, no wiring beyond a light and a gate. It's a metal shell on a concrete slab. Building one runs around $50 to $120 a square foot. An apartment building? $200 to $700. So storage is 3 to 6 times cheaper to put up than the housing it sits next to. And it goes up faster, on land so unglamorous nobody else has a use for it. Then look at running it. There's nothing inside to break. The tenant brings their own lock, loads their own stuff, and does all the heavy lifting themselves. The customer is the labor force. A whole facility is run by a skeleton crew of 1 or 2 people, and the big chains are automating even that away, moving rentals online and putting a kiosk where the front desk used to be. So you've got a building that's cheap to make, cheap to run, and barely needs a human. That alone would be a decent business. It's what comes next that makes it remarkable. Now, why does anyone rent these things in the first place, and keep renting them for years? The industry has a grimly honest answer it calls the 5 Ds. Death. Someone dies, and the family can't face sorting the house, so the furniture goes into a unit. Out of sight, out of mind. Downsizing. The kids leave, the big house goes, and a decade of life won't fit in the smaller one. Divorce. One household becomes 2, and half of everything needs somewhere to wait. Dislocation. A foreclosure, a hurricane, a military posting. People who've lost their footing need to put their life somewhere. And decluttering. The slow, ordinary overflow of a house that simply owns too much. Notice the pattern. Almost none of these are happy. People reach for a storage unit at the messiest moments of their lives, and they are in no state to be price-sensitive. But there's a deeper current under all 5. For most of the last 60 years, American home prices have climbed far faster than wages. The big suburban house quietly became unaffordable, so people crowded into smaller urban apartments instead. Today, over 80% of Americans live in urban areas, against barely 20% in the 1950s. Less space at home, the same amount of stuff. The gap has to go somewhere. It goes into the box with the number on the door. Here's where the numbers start to look unreal. Take the giant of the industry, Public Storage, the orange-doored chain you've definitely seen. In 2025, it ran around 3,500 facilities and pulled in roughly $4.8 billion. Almost all of that, about 94%, is just rent. And because the building costs so little to operate, what's left over is enormous. On its core portfolio, Public Storage keeps a net operating margin of around 75%. 75 cents of operating profit on every dollar of rent. To put that in perspective, that's not a real estate number. That's the kind of margin software companies brag about. Except this software has a drain in the floor and a roll-up door. And here's the part that surprises people. The single biggest cost of running one of these places isn't staff or repairs or marketing. It's property tax, often close to half of a facility's operating costs. Think about what that means. The most expensive thing about a storage facility is the government's bill for the land. The actual business, the renting, costs almost nothing to run. Which raises an obvious question: if the building is that cheap and the rent is that clean, where does the real money get made? Not in the concrete, in the price. This is the engine, and it's the part most explanations of this business politely skip. When you sign up for a storage unit, the price you're quoted is a teaser. In one real market, the going rate for a 10 by 10 unit was about $130 a month, but the big chains were advertising the same space at $72, $77, sometimes $1 for the first month. They are buying your move-in because they know exactly what happens next. Once your stuff is in that unit, once you've done the lifting, hung the lock, and put the key on your ring, the rent starts to climb. The industry even has a clinical name for it: the existing customer rate increase. The first one can land within a few months, and it is not gentle. Operators have openly described first increases anywhere from 20 to 100%, commonly 30 or 40, then steady mid-teens raises after that. One documented customer watched a $45 unit become $75 within 2 months, and over $200 within a year. And here is the fact the entire model rests on: almost nobody leaves. Fewer than 5% of customers move out within a month of a price hike. Of course they don't. Moving everything back out is a miserable weekend, and the stuff was annoying to deal with in the first place. That's why it's in storage. The friction that put your things in the unit is the same friction that keeps you paying. There's even a billing trick on top. Many operators charge every 28 days, which quietly squeezes 13 rent cycles into a year instead of 12. So when you ask where the margin in self-storage really comes from, this is the honest answer. The product is a concrete box. The business is a number that only goes up, sold to a customer who has already decided not to argue. A machine this good doesn't stay in the hands of mom-and-pop owners forever. And for a long time, that's exactly who owned it. The industry is astonishingly fragmented. There are around 50,000 storage facilities in America, split between something like 13,000 different owners, most of them small operators with a site or two. Even now, the 3 biggest public companies combined control only about 15% of the country's storage space. That fragmentation is the opportunity, because a single facility owned by one family is worth a fairly modest multiple of its profit. But bolt hundreds of them together under one brand, one app, one pricing algorithm running those rate increases automatically, and the combined company is suddenly worth far more per dollar of profit than the pieces were apart. So the real estate investment trusts went shopping. The clearest moment came in 2023, when Extra Space Storage bought its rival Life Storage for nearly $13 billion, overtaking Public Storage to become the country's largest operator with more than 4,000 stores. The prize was never the buildings. It was the pricing power you unlock when you run enough of them to set the rate everywhere at once. If this is the part where you're starting to see the machine, the membership-style lock-in, the near-zero cost, the roll-up, that's the whole point of this series, a different ordinary business taken apart every week. But here's the thing about a formula this clean. The moment everyone can see it, everyone builds it. And by the mid-2020s, everyone had. Cheap to build, famously profitable, so developers carpeted the country with new facilities, especially across the Sun Belt. The result was oversupply. With too many empty units chasing the same renters, the chains had to keep teaser rates low just to fill them, and national street rates actually started falling, down a couple of % a year. The recession-proof goldmine met its first genuinely soft patch. You can read it straight off the leader's own books. Public Storage's net income in 2025 fell about 15%, and its guidance for 2026 forecast operating income going down, not up. Management's own words pointed to a challenging environment, and then the pricing machine attracted exactly the attention you'd expect. New York City's consumer protection regulator sued Extra Space, accusing the company of bait-and-switch pricing. The teaser-then-raise playbook, named in a lawsuit. The trick that built the fortune had become the trick that drew the subpoena. None of this means the business is broken. It means the easiest, most one-sided years of it are over. The part where you could build almost anywhere and ratchet almost anyone. From here, it gets selective and a lot more like ordinary real estate, where location and discipline decide who wins. So, is self-storage a money machine? Honestly, yes, and that's the uncomfortable part. It's a machine built on the cheapest possible building. The messiest moments of people's lives, a teaser price, and a rate increase you're too tired to fight. All of that is true at once, and all of it is legal, and most of it you agreed to without reading. But step back, and the real lesson isn't about storage at all. The pattern is the thing to take with you. Find a service people reach for when they're not paying attention. Make the cost to deliver it almost nothing. Lock the customer in with friction instead of contracts, and then own enough of the market to control the price. Once you can see that shape, the low number, the lock-in, the quiet ratchet, you start to notice it everywhere you spend money. The gym you don't cancel, the subscription that crept up, the unit full of things you'll deal with someday. We are going to keep taking these apart, one boring building at a time. The next one's already got your money.